Justice here, and tonight I'm going to be talking about grade inflation. First of all, grade inflation is the rewarding of higher grades to students that don't deserve it to maintain a school's reputation or the result of a teacher's diminished expectations. So with a little bit of background, grade inflation is the result of the Vietnam War, and it happened because professors decided to inflate grades in order to prevent young working men from being drafted into the war that lacked public support. As a result, in 1973, GPAs at four-year universities rose by 0.4 points, making an A the most common grade. Today, people argue that grade inflation is not a problem because it's just an increase in students' quality of work. However, grade inflation is detrimental to students' education, and many of you guys may have experienced grade inflation from your guys' professors curbing a test or a quiz because a large portion of you failed. My first claim, or my proposition, is grade inflation is a bad method of grading at four-year universities. My first claim is grade inflation has not shown an increase in students' academic competency. And my second claim is some professors' reliance on grade inflation decreases the quality of an education. So my first claim, which is, again, grade inflation has not shown an increase in students' academic competency. In a scholarly journal in 2004 called A Synergistic Approach to Turning the Tide of Grade Inflation, written by Kim Harwin and Michael Gordon, shows how the quality of students has declined in America. The authors say students demonstrate no significant improvements in a range of cognitive skills. College students have not developed better methods of problem solving, learning, and even paying attention in their classes, but professors inflate grades to mask students' lack of performance and on testing quizzes. In addition to that, grade inflation encourages the majority of students to spend less time studying. In a journal article, Grade Inflation Gone Wild by Stuart Rochester, he explains a recent survey of more than 30,000 first-year students across the country showed that nearly half were spending more time drinking alcohol than they were studying. Students rather consume higher amounts of alcohol and depend on procrastination and grade inflation to get by. Students have devolved from being active learners because grade inflation gives them the opportunity to spend less time studying. My second claim is grade inflation decreases the quality of an education. This is because professors fear that bad student professor evaluations will prevent wage increases, promotion, and tenure. This fear is the downfall of the quality of education and the main cause of grade inflation today. Harwin and Gordon say faculties have learned to buy better grade evaluations. Professors without difficulty are swayed to drop students' lowest test scores and curve grades to encourage noble evaluations, which in turn either increase their pay or give them tenure. In addition to that, Stuart Rochester created gradeinflation.com to show people that grade inflation is a nationwide problem and provides statistical data from multiple universities to demonstrate the existence of grade inflation. He says to keep leadership happy and ensure their tenure and promotion, they had to focus on keeping students happy, which he's referring to professors. Students are satisfied when professors inflate grades and lower their standards, and statistics show by 2013 the average college student had about a 3.15 GPA and 45% of all A through F letter grades were A's. In addition to that, the University of Concordia, Portland published how grade inflation hurts students, said that GPAs increase 1.5 points every 10 years. Some individuals claim that grade inflation is non-existent and the rise of GPA is the result of having better quality students. This is supported by using standardized test scores like the SAT to attempt and correlate 100 point increase on their scores to a 0.1 increase in GPAs. However, the sample size of 160 schools to draw such a drastic conclusion does not accurately represent the vast majority of universities. The rise in GPAs is not justified by having better quality students, but rather professors who inflate grades distributed. Professors acknowledge grade inflation, as stated by Heroin and Gordon, saying that faculty is unwilling to increase the demands of their courses despite acknowledgement of their teaching, and teaching does not require adequate student participation. Active student participation is an important aspect of teaching that many professors ignore. This is not a quality education because the majority of teachers focus on getting good student-professor evaluations by inflating grades. Studies have shown that difficult grading and active participation improves the quality of learning. In conclusion, the origin of grade inflation evolved from the Vietnam War because professors wanted to prevent young working men from being drafted into the war. And in the 70s, it was a logical explanation to inflate grades. But since then, GPAs have increased 0.5 points, and consequently, it's causes a lack of the quality of learning. Students don't understand the classes that they're in. They just fail, and then the teacher just curves the class, and then they end up getting a better grade than they actually did. Student-professor evaluations cause a decrease in the quality of education by lowering their standards expected of students, and in return, unjustly inflating grades. That's it.
Well, I'll try to ensure there's no grade inflation when your score comes up here. The proposition's fairly well identified, although it seemed to me like you had a better and clearer statement of your proposition about 30 seconds before the one that you actually gave. I wrote it down: grade inflation is detrimental to student learning, and that was what I thought your proposition was going to be. And then you came back and talked about you had a different phrase for the proposition that I didn't think was quite as clear. So if you were going to go back and do it again, I would stick with that original statement and use that as the claim. There's a reasonable preview, although I think you rushed the second point when you were previewing it, and it didn't come out very clearly. When you got to that supporting point in the body of the speech, it was clearly labeled. You've got a lot of testimony evidence here that you're using from a variety of sources to explain what grade inflation is, why it exists, what the consequences of it are. I thought that that was pretty solid. There's some statistical information to support some of your positions as well, so you did a pretty good job citing that also. I do think that there's the historical context for grade inflation is probably a little bit less important than what's going on now. I don't think anybody, well, there hasn't been a draft since since 1971, and that I think is a little bit problematic in justifying any grade inflation currently. So the question then becomes, did people just get used to it, or is it students been demanding more, or professors really don't have regular increases in their salaries, and so the only way they can do that is with some kind of merit evaluation that's enhanced by student evaluations. I think there are some big presuppositions built into these arguments that need a little bit more development and proof. All right, I'm going to try and keep it short so we can get through all those.